Welcome to the Azure AD B2C webinar series. Today we have a session on custom policy walkthrough. We're joined by John Garland from WinElect, and he will be diving into this a bit more. He's a VP in the space, and he'll dive into a bit more of his intro. And we're also joined on the Q&A side by Vinu and Jazz, who are both program managers for Microsoft. And we'll dive into a bit more. So this week will be the custom policy part 2 of the walkthrough, and then we'll have another session coming up. And then if you haven't been able to join for the other ones, there are the recordings that are going to be posted as well to be able to go through. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to John and the rest of the team on Q&A as well to dive into today's session. We really appreciate you joining, and thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Sophia. Hello to everyone and welcome. My name, as Sophia said, is John Garland, and I'm the Vice President for Cloud Development at WinElect. We've been an award-winning Microsoft partner for many years with a focus on both consulting and training in Azure, as well as other Microsoft and related technologies. I myself am a Microsoft Azure MVP, a Microsoft certified trainer, and an instructor at WinElect. In fact, I teach a course that WinElect offers to help our partners learn how to effectively use Azure AD B2C. I've also written some extensive posts covering Azure AD B2C. You can find out more about me and WinElect and see the content I've written at winelect.com, and I also tweet at the .NET Gator alias. As Sophia mentioned, also on the call with us today are Vinu Gunasekaran and Jaz Suri from Microsoft to handle Q&A. They're both Azure AD B2C program managers. This session is part of the Azure AD B2C webinar series covering identity protocols and Azure AD B2C custom policy deep dives. In the previous session, we introduced the concepts behind Azure AD B2C custom policies. And in this session, we'll put those concepts into practice by walking through the creation of a custom policy. So thank you for joining us today. We're very excited that you're here. In today's session, we're going to review the exercise that we introduced last week. We're going to show the steps to get started with creating an Azure AD custom policy for a loyalty number policy example. We're going to set up a workspace with the policy files for our new custom policy. We'll define the loyalty number claim to be collected. We'll configure the user account profile editing experience to include the information we need to collect from the user. We're going to modify the policy to read and write that information to the backing Azure AD directory storage. We'll update the user journey to include gathering information if certain conditions are met. And then we'll return the user information we collected in the set of claims that are included in the token that's going to be returned by the policy. Today's content does assume that you're familiar with the prerequisite material that is outlined in the session description. This includes an understanding of what Azure AD B2C is, knowing how to do basic configuration and user flow creation using Azure AD B2C, and understanding basic Azure AD B2C use cases. Also, if you haven't seen the previous sessions in this series, you may want to check out the recordings in order to supplement what we're going to be going over today. Okay, let's get started. In the previous session, we presented the scenario that we would like to walk through today. To review, assume that your project has asked you to configure Azure AD B2C to sign up new customers or sign in existing customers. Users will only use local credentials, no third-party identity providers quite yet. Beyond customers' email addresses, first and last names, you're also going to need to collect a loyalty number from your customers. A loyalty number is basically one of those grocery store, membership point, club numbers kind of things. However, you want to make sure that the initial sign up for your customers is as quick and brief as possible. So you don't want to really bother them with the loyalty number information right up front. This is known as a progressive profiling technique, where you initially prompt the users for the bare minimum information you need to collect for them, but then you can gradually ask for more and more information until you've completely built up their profile. We've published the scenario for you at the link below, and the write-up published up here includes a walkthrough of a version of the solution that we're going to be going over today. So let's also review the steps that were discussed in the previous session that you'll need to take to get started with setting up an Azure AD B2C tenant to work with custom policies. First, you're going to need to create an instance of the Azure AD B2C service. This will create a special Azure AD tenant that is set up with elements it needs to work with Azure AD B2C. You then need to link that tenant back to a resource in an Azure subscription so the B2C billing can be managed through that Azure subscription. Next, you'll need to create keys that your custom policies will use to both sign and encrypt the tokens that it's going to issue. You're going to be assuming you're working with local accounts, you're going to register a pair of applications that allow your policies to use the Azure AD B2C tenants OpenID Connect endpoints to sign in those users. If you're working with custom claims, you'll also need to obtain a couple of values that will be used to work with the underlying Azure AD data store to save and retrieve those claims. And finally, not part of this example, but if your policy works with external identity providers like Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., you're going to need to register your Azure AD B2C instance with those identity providers and then use the values that those identity providers give you to configure your policy to work with them. Basically, you need to tell them about your policy. You need to tell your policy